Hey everyone. So I'll try and claw back some of the time that we lost, but it's good to know that some of the banks that we all bank with are investing in making sure that KYC is still resilient. So in my space, I thought I'd use a slide that one of my, our CEO has used in the past, which is, I think if I didn't make mention of GPT, I'd probably get booed off stage. So what I thought I'd do is I'd recycle a slide. How do we actually say hello to a group of people involved in compliance, GRC, and GPT came up with some good stuff. So defenders or guardians of compliance, which is great. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But here we go. So when we talk about merging AI with human intelligence, one of the really interesting things that we've seen, and this is a real alert that was generated in a Microsoft Teams chat that happened internally. So while taking communications offline onto WhatsApp is all the rage, while bad actors are still all the rage, it turns out that people are still a little bit stressed out. And if you just rely on random sampling, if you rely on words and phrases, it turns out you can't actually pick up this communication. So this is where the blend of artificial intelligence or large language models and actual communications data comes to the fore. So what happened over here? And if anyone thinks that Lexicon can pick it up, do let me know. I'm looking for new investment opportunities. But for those of you who are with me on this one, right at the bottom, what this triggered for is someone saying, please leave me alone. What this also triggered for is someone at the top saying, I'm feeling stressed. But the way they say it is not exactly written in clear form. So what happens over here is that a piece of communication has come in. It's running against a series of risk models, and it's actually flagging an alert for someone to review. Now, AI itself doesn't make a determination that this person is stressed out, or this person is a bad actor, or this person is at risk of doing something nefarious. All the machine is doing is it's saying, I'm looking at the way someone is writing, and I'm correlating it with a data set that I have. I'm using something that I can't talk to you about, but something that's called logistic regression, to actually make a probabilistic determination that those phrases are indicative of something awry. And it's flagging that for people to review. So for the rest of, let's say, the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk a little bit about how is that built, how is that explainable, not only to you today, but to internal audit, our good friends, to regulators, and to people at home, and to people who are giving you money to buy software like Behavox. How can we explain it to them? And then where do we go from here? So let's get right into it. Just how does Behavox work? For those of you who want to decide which booths to visit or which not to visit, very simple. Every bit of written or spoken communication within your corporate domain, it gets brought in to Behavox. We've built a domain-specific large language model. We also use keywords and phrases and random samples. You can't get rid of it overnight. And what we do is we generate alerts like the one you saw in the previous slide. That's how Behavox works. Why do we do all of that? We do that because ultimately what we're trying to help organizations with is to identify compliance risk, such as market abuse, market misconduct. What I also find a little bit interesting for those of you on the internal fraud or financial crime side is proactive indicators. So people who are on the critical path of doing something, they've not yet done it. So that's insider crime, be it exfiltration of IP, be it work complaints. But what I also see, at least the FCA talk a little bit more about, and given it is, I'm told, Mental Health Month, I see a lot more focus on culture and conduct as well, because good culture drives good compliance. So we see a lot more focus on looking for those signals and communications data as well. What do we need AI for? Well, on your left, you have the world today, which is where we require a lot of human capital, a lot of cost to sift through alerts, whether it's KYC, whether it's insider crime, whether it's trade alerts, comms alerts. The world on the left is what we're dealing with today. It's why last week there were some interesting true positives that were released in the news. I think a bank that was on stage recently might have something to say about it, but they were in the news because there were some alerts that they weren't able to identify. And when they did identify it, the thing was, well, just don't do it again because we don't really have the capacity to deal with this. So what AI does is AI moves you, or the promise of AI moves you from left to right, which is a reduction of the junk that people deal with, which is the obvious false positives, right? And giving you relevant alerts that are investigation worthy. So one of the questions we get as a vendor is, well, surely AI is going to reduce our costs. Bringing in AI means we can just fire everyone and we can have a machine do it. It's like Siri for compliance. And that's not true. Because what AI does is you can reduce low-cost effort of people clicking buttons and removing alerts. But what you have to invest in is upskilling your team to actually understand the alerts that are being generated. Because someone saying I'm stressed out, maybe it's easy to just discard it. But someone saying I'm stressed out when they're a wealth manager and having financial problems is a different ballgame altogether. So that's where the crossroad, the intersection of AI and human competence, in my opinion, comes to the fore. You can't just get rid of people, and you can't just go all in on AI. How does it then work? Well, you can try and do what a lot of people are saying, and you can do what I've experimented with and take a phrase, go into Bard or ChatGPT and say, is this a true positive? And you can hope for the best. Click regenerate response, and hopefully you get the same answer. That's not explainable, it's not defendable, and it quite frankly isn't specific to any of your domains. So what did we do? We said, well, let's take what's built out there. Let's take Bloom, Bard, let's take GPT, let's take Palm AI, let's take all these fancy large language models that have had billions and trillions of dollars of investment, and let's feed them and fine-tune them with financial services specific data. So that's sentences and communications that are indicative of spoofing, sentences that are indicative of abusive language, of racism, of discrimination. So that way we're fine-tuning and building our own large language model that can be explained and defended. How did we get that data? Well, we've very kindly, if you look at an FCA final notice, it's written in a very formulaic manner, so it's easy to parse. If you look at an SEC notice, again, if you look at litigation, they're all very easy to pull out, like the enforcements from last week, where you can pull out what a true positive looks like or what false positives look like. You can use them, you can amplify them. We also have a whole host of our customers who give us access to this data, anonymized, of course. There's then the experts that exist around the world that feed us with synthetic data that we can use to build this model. So again, not only is AI intersecting with humans to review the alerts and have a quality approach and subject matter expert determination of what is a true and false positive, humans and AI have to intersect to actually build the software in the first place. We can't have leave it to the beaver approach when it comes to just let's feed it to ChatGPT and hope for the best. And that's not going to work. Let's give you an example then. So you get a sentence like this. These are all fake bids. Now, I'd encourage all of you to go into, when you get time, into one of your GPT models or any other large language model, feed the sentence in and ask it to give you a whole host of variations of the sentence. You'll get some awesome responses. Take those responses and feed them through your current system, into a lexicon system. Not this, but with symbols in text, with grammatical errors, syntactical errors, maybe even LEET, which is a total transformer where you can convert words into numbers, and you probably won't identify this. So that's one gap that the systems have today. So we take this, we not only review it to make sure it actually is a true positive, we then amplify it using one of these large language models. Then we feed that all into a training data set, which then learns, and then we can run that in production. How do we run that in production? How does AI actually work in prod? It works as shown on the screen, which is you take a sentence. So someone says, I mess around a lot with the market. You correlate that sentence with your training data set. And then if there's a probabilistic determination that there's a match, it generates an alert. Obviously, where do you want humans? Again, you want humans to adjust thresholds, because sometimes what you can do is, obviously I can catch every true positive if every piece of communication I have flags, and that's not very helpful. So what you do is for each risk you care about, you dial up and you dial down thresholds that then give rise to alerts. And threshold setting is done by people who are incredibly intelligent, but also subject matter experts, people, intersection of AI and humans. How does that correlation happen? I alluded to this, but the really interesting thing for those of you who are taking pictures, not of me, but of the screen, is it converts the text into numbers. So it is taking numbers, it is doing a probabilistic logistic regression between those numbers that are in your data set and the numbers that are sitting in our training data set. And once there's a match or there's a kind of correlation, that's when it generates the alert. So if someone's sitting in front of you, if a regulator's sitting in front of you and says, it was easy last year because this word triggers, it generates an alert. How does that work today? You have all this documentation to show them. But then the question I get asked is, I don't understand numbers. How do I show documentation to anyone who wants to understand how does AI generate an alert? Well, all the data sets that any vendor you talk to says they have, they should be able to demonstrate those data sets to you. So if someone comes to me and says, Behavox, I want to see your entire training data set, no problem. I'm not going to send it to you in a spreadsheet, but you're welcome to come to a data room and you're welcome to interrogate that training data set. That's what gives you confidence that what was lexicon before is now a diverse, comprehensive, and representative data set. 3 important words. And then how do we know it works? Well, we didn't come up with the methodology. We actually borrowed the methodology from the Fed Reserve, and they put this out way back when, and it's called SR 11.7. What we're looking for is, can you actually explain it? So is it conceptually sound, what you're looking for? And then the most important thing, I alluded to this example, is called outcomes analysis. Let's build a data set. Let's take a data set and feed it through your baseline system today, feed it through any vendor you're looking through tomorrow, feed it through GPT, and let's look for recall. Can that system that you're feeding the data through actually identify the true positives in question? More importantly, how many false positives is it producing? Can you actually evidence it? That becomes part of the data set that you're building. And then what you want to do is ongoing monitoring. So it's not just good enough to set it and forget it. If we think back to 2020, a lifetime ago when SPACs were all the rage, if anyone remembers that time of our lives, people were actively amending their lexicons to just look for SPACs. Now, that's not going to work. In fact, someone highlighted to me outside that there are 41 instant messaging platforms that are being used by financial services agencies, yet when you read Wall Street Journal or Business Insider, apologies if you're in the room, they just allude to WhatsApp and WeChat. That's not effective. So you need to have ongoing monitoring, dynamic approach in your data sets to actually look for the risks you care about when people are trying to take communications offline. So here's an example. I really like this. This is outcomes analysis. So someone gives you a sentence, and you can take that sentence and you can feed it through a model, but what we first do is we amplify that sentence. So don't worry, there'll be someone on the other side. We made sure there'll be a buyer to meet you. You can amplify it, you can include numbers, symbols, everything else. What you do with that data set is then you feed it through the machine. So you throw it at words and phrases. Not a great recall. I wouldn't put my money on that. But then what you do is you feed it through AI. And I think the important thing to highlight, and this is where quality human interaction is required, is it's not giving me 100% return. So if anyone's expecting AI to all of a sudden solve every single problem in the world, it's not happening. But moving from 6% to 70% is not the worst thing. But within that 70%, what you need to do is you need to have those compliance subject matter experts, the people we've up-leveled, review every single alert, investigate them to make that determination. Is this actionable? Is this relevant? Is this something we need to self-report? Because if some of you have also seen what happened last week with respect to WhatsApp and WeChat, some organizations, instead of paying 200 million in fines, have paid 20 million in fines, but that's because they've self-reported the approaches they have to actually monitoring for how people are trying to take communications offline. And in one instance, one of those organizations has even evidenced outcomes analysis like this, which I think the regulators have liked. So that's a simple way that all of us can actually evidence it. In fact, my team is outside, and if anyone wants to come and test WhatsApp and WeChat, there's a game they've built called Challenge AI. You're welcome to come and come up with a phrase that you think can beat AI and take communications offline. And if you win, great. If you don't, then AI is continuing to improve. So what are some of the other benefits of AI? Before, humans would have to sit down and come up with phrases. So many of us in this room have actually sat down and manually hard-coded words and phrases that we think machines should look for. You no longer have to do that. They're prefab, pre-trained models that you can roll out from day one. What you're doing is you're just adjusting thresholds. What is one of the other benefits? So humans, like I said, subject matter experts are actually informing the training data set. They're actually evidencing the approach that's been taken, and then that's what you're including as part of your representation to internal and external regulators. The third instance of where there's a great interaction between AI and humans is it's not unsupervised. So you're not just sitting there as a reviewer clicking a button and the machine is learning. Every single interaction someone has with the machine is carefully reviewed by a subject matter expert, and then borrowing from the scientific community is peer reviewed multiple times to say that this actually is a true or this actually is a false positive, and this is how we feed it back into the system. How are humans also influencing it? Horizon scanning. Risks continue to evolve. You can't expect GPT, which has data that's up to date only for a while ago, to tell you what the latest and greatest risks are. You need humans and competent people to scan and tell you that these are the risks that you want to improve your large language models with. And then that finally brings me to the last thing, which is ultimately it's clients, it's the market, it's the regulators as part of the education that inform and improve the quality of AI. AI just by itself is going to learn, and that's when you get AI that is not representative of your data sets, AI that is not comprehensive or diverse, which means it's AI that will ultimately regress. So that's why we have a human in the loop approach to actually training and improving artificial intelligence. So I'll summarize, and then I will hand it back because I'm sure lunch is out, and I'm also on the next panel. But it's really important when people talk about AI and humans to not have, and I'll say it again, don't have a leave it to Beaver approach. Don't just trust ChatGPT. Don't just trust Bard and say, I'm going to take a bunch of communications, feed it in, and hope it works. It is not explainable, it is not defendable, and it is not representative of your data. What you need to do is you need to have the right people training the AI, and then you need to have the right people reviewing the AI, and you also need to have an acceptance that at the end of the day, no matter how good it's becoming right now, you're not getting 100% recall. So with that, thank you everyone for your time and for active participation.